I'm Shirley, 27, a graphic designer who sacrificed for years while living with my parents to build my career. After finally saving enough for my first real vacation to Hawaii, I returned home to find my bedroom completely transformed into my brother's Livestream studio. Standing in the doorway stunned, my father pointed to the backyard shed and delivered his ultimatum: "Stay here or get out of the house." With tears streaming down my face, I chose to leave with just one suitcase. I wonder where you're watching from today. If my story of betrayal and rebuilding resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see how I transformed this heartbreak into the best decision of my life. Growing up as the oldest child in our middle-class family in suburban Ohio, I always felt secure in my parents' love. Our modest two-story home on Maple Street represented stability and comfort throughout my childhood. My mother, Lisa, was especially close to me, teaching me to bake cookies on Sunday afternoons and helping with school projects late into the night. My father, Robert, worked long hours at the manufacturing plant, but always made time for our weekend family picnics at the local park. Things began to shift when my brother Jake was born when I was 8 years old. As the baby of the family, Jake naturally received plenty of attention, but as the years passed, the family dynamic permanently tilted in his favor. While I was expected to maintain straight as help with household chores and behave responsibly, Jake seemed to operate under a different set of rules entirely. "Jake is just more sensitive," my mother would explain when he threw tantrums about doing dishes or taking out trash. "Boys develop differently," my father would say when Jake brought home C grades on his report card. By the time I left for college, Jake had become accustomed to special treatment, from extra dessert portions to having his laundry done for him, while I was expected to handle my own responsibilities. Despite recognizing this imbalance, I maintained a good relationship with my parents. After graduating with my design degree, I made the practical decision to move back home rather than wasting money on rent. The plan made perfect sense. I could build my freelance graphic design business while saving for my future. My parents seemed happy to have me back, and I immediately established that I would contribute $800 monthly toward household expenses. "You don't need to do that, honey," my mother protested, but I insisted. This was my adult life, and I wanted to carry my weight. I converted the small bedroom that had been mine since childhood into a functional workspace, adding a proper desk ergonomic chair and the technology I needed for my design work. I kept everything neat and organized, respecting the shared space of our home. Meanwhile, Jake struggled through his first semester of community college before announcing that he was dropping out to pursue his real passion, becoming a professional gamer and streamer. "This is the future, Dad," he proclaimed at dinner one night. "People make millions playing games and building audiences online." To my surprise, my parents nodded along with his grand plans. My father even patted him on the shoulder and said, "Well, you've always been good at those video games. Maybe this is your calling." The stark contrast to their reaction when I announced my design aspirations was not lost on me. They had questioned whether artists could make a real living and suggested I consider accounting instead. Yet Jake's dream of gaming stardom was met with enthusiastic support despite having no portfolio training or even a modest following online. As the months passed, the tension in our household grew. I was working 60-plus-hour weeks, often continuing projects late into the night to meet client deadlines. From my bedroom, I could hear Jake shouting at his games in the next room, often past 2 in the morning. When I politely asked if he could keep it down during my work hours, my parents suggested I should be more understanding of his creative process. "He needs to be authentic on stream," my mother explained, as if his authenticity somehow mattered more than my ability to serve paying clients. Jake contributed nothing to household expenses, yet my parents bought him a new gaming chair, extra monitors, and professional microphones. Meanwhile, I saved every penny possible, dreaming of eventually having enough for a down payment on a small condo. By spring, I had landed my biggest client yet, a regional chain of organic markets that needed complete rebranding. The project came with my largest paycheck to date, and after 5 years of nonstop work without a real break, I decided to reward myself with something special: a week-long trip to Hawaii. It would be my first real vacation since college graduation. "That's a lot of money to spend on just 1 week," my father commented when I shared my plans over Sunday dinner. "I think I've earned it," I replied, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I haven't taken any time off in years." "Well, it sounds wonderful," my mother chimed in, though her enthusiasm seemed forced. We'll hold down the fort while you're gone. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Jake measuring the dimensions of my bedroom when he thought I was at a client meeting. My mother asking detailed questions about exactly which days I'd be gone. But I was too excited about my trip, too focused on finally doing something just for me to connect these strange dots. The night before my departure, Jake actually helped me carry my suitcase downstairs, something so out of character that I joked about it. "What's gotten into you? Since when do you help with anything?" I teased. He shrugged with an odd little smile. "Just want you to have a good trip, sis. You deserve it." If only I had known what that smile really meant. Hawaii was everything I had dreamed it would be and more. The moment I stepped off the plane in Honolulu, the warm tropical air embraced me like a welcome hug. After checking into my modest but clean hotel just 3 blocks from Waikiki Beach, I kicked off my shoes and stood on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in years, I felt the tension melt from my shoulders. Each morning I woke with the sunrise, something I never had time to appreciate back home. I spent my days exploring hidden beaches, hiking to breathtaking viewpoints, and sampling local cuisine from roadside stands. I took hundreds of photos, sending the best ones to my family's group chat. Their responses were strangely minimal, just quick thumbs-up emojis from my mother and nothing at all from my father or Jake. On my 4th day, while floating in the crystal-clear water, I realized I hadn't thought about work once that morning. The constant mental checklist that usually ran through my mind had quieted, replaced by simple appreciation for the present moment. This was what it felt like to truly relax. As my magical week drew to a close, I received an odd text from my mother. "What time exactly does your flight land on Saturday? And you're taking an Uber home, right?" The specificity struck me as strange, but I brushed it off, figuring they might be planning a welcome home dinner or something similarly thoughtful. The long flight back to Ohio left me exhausted but happy. As the Uber pulled into our familiar neighborhood, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, reluctance to return to my hectic work schedule, but comfort at coming back to my own space, where I could process all the beautiful memories I'd made. The first thing I noticed was Jake's gaming equipment spread across the living room coffee table, controllers, headphones, energy drink cans, which was unusual since he normally kept everything in his room. My mother greeted me with a quick hug that felt stiff and nervous. "How was the trip? You look tan. Are you hungry? Dad's in the garage," she said, words tumbling out too quickly as she took one of my bags and headed upstairs. I followed her, noticing how she paused at the top of the stairs, taking a deep breath before turning right toward my bedroom. When she pushed open the door, the room before me was unrecognizable. Where my carefully organized workspace had been there, now stood a professional-looking streaming setup. 3 large monitors dominated a new L-shaped desk. Professional lighting equipment was mounted on stands around the room. The walls, once painted in my chosen soft blue, were now covered with dark soundproofing panels. My bed was completely gone. Every trace of my existence had been erased. "What? What is this?" I whispered, unable to process what I was seeing. "Where's my stuff?" My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Jake needed a proper studio for his streaming career. "We moved your things to the garage." As if summoned by his name, Jake appeared in the doorway, beaming with pride. "Sweet setup, right? Got almost 300 followers already." My father joined us, wiping his hands on a rag. "We figured, since you're never home anyway, always working, this made more sense for the family." "The family," I repeated, my voice rising. "I am part of this family. Where am I supposed to sleep? Where will I work?" My father shrugged as if my concerns were an inconvenience. We cleared out the garden shed. "Put a cot in there. You can set up a desk too if you want. It's got electricity." The garden shed was a 8 by 10-foot wooden structure in our backyard. It had no insulation, no bathroom, and was primarily home to spiders and gardening tools. In summer, it was sweltering. In winter, freezing. "You expect me to live in the shed. I pay $800 a month to live here." "Well, if that doesn't work for you," my father gestured vaguely toward the front door. "You're an adult. You can find your own place." I looked to my mother, waiting for her to intervene, to acknowledge the insanity of this situation. She merely twisted her hands together, still avoiding eye contact. Mom, you agreed to this. Jake needs this opportunity, surely. His streaming could really take off with the right setup. And what about my work? My actual career that pays actual money? Jake snorted. Come on, sis. Drawing pictures for grocery stores isn't exactly changing the world. I'm building a community. I could be the next big thing. I felt dizzy with disbelief and betrayal. Walking numbly to the garage, I found my possessions haphazardly stuffed into plastic storage bins. My clothes were wrinkled books stacked without care, and some of my framed artwork had cracked glass. 5 years of building my life treated like worthless junk to make room for Jake's gaming equipment. When I returned to the house, my decision was made. I'm not living in a shed, and I won't stay where I'm clearly not valued. Don't be so dramatic, my father said dismissively. It's just a room. It wasn't just a room. It was my space, my home, and you gave it away without even discussing it with me. Jake lounged against the doorframe of what used to be my bedroom. You should be happy, actually. You're finally contributing something useful to the family. In that moment, I saw with painful clarity what my family really thought of me, not as a person deserving respect, but as a convenience to be used and discarded when something more interesting came along. 5 years of contributing financially, of being responsible and dependable, meant nothing compared to Jake's potential internet fame. I'll be out within an hour, I said quietly. No one tried to stop me. The finality of the car door closing behind me echoed like a period at the end of a chapter. My small Toyota was packed with whatever essentials I could quickly gather. Some clothes, my laptop and design equipment, toiletries, and a few sentimental items I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else, furniture, books, kitchen supplies I'd bought for after-college apartment living, remained behind in those carelessly packed bins. I had no destination in mind, just the burning need to be anywhere but there. The digital clock on my dashboard read 7:43 p.m. as I pulled away from the only home I'd ever known. No one came outside to wave goodbye or ask me to reconsider. Through my rearview mirror, I could see Jake already back at his new streaming setup, visible through the window that once looked into my bedroom. The immediate logistics were daunting. With limited savings and much of it recently spent on my Hawaii trip, I checked into a budget motel on the outskirts of town. $49 a night would quickly add up, but I needed time to figure out next steps. The room was clean but depressing, with faded floral bedspreads and the lingering smell of old cigarettes despite the no smoking sign. That first night I sat cross-legged on the squeaky bed, laptop open to apartment listings, and tried to make sense of my new reality. Rent in our area averaged around $900 for even the smallest studios, more than I had been paying my parents. Security deposits, application fees, utility hookups, the costs multiplied with each search. I kept expecting my phone to light up with concerned texts from my mother or even an angry message from my father, but there was nothing. The only communication came from Jake, a mocking text that simply read, "Shed still available if you change your mind. LOL." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to unleash years of pent-up resentment, but instead I blocked his number. One toxic relationship at a time. Focusing on work proved nearly impossible. Client emails blurred before my eyes, and design concepts that normally flowed easily felt stuck and lifeless. I explained to my biggest clients that I was relocating and might be briefly delayed on deliverables. Most were understanding, but I could feel the precious professional reputation I'd built becoming vulnerable. After a week of motel living, draining my account by $343, I found a tiny studio apartment in a somewhat rundown complex 20 minutes from downtown. The rent was $875 monthly, at the very edge of what I could afford. The security deposit plus first month's rent depleted my emergency fund almost entirely. My new home measured just under 400 square feet, with a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a main living space that would have to serve as both bedroom and office. The beige carpet was worn thin in high-traffic areas, and the white walls bore the shadowy outlines of previous tenants' picture frames. But it was mine, a space where no one could displace me without warning. Furnishing the apartment became an exercise in extreme budgeting. A twin mattress from the discount furniture warehouse, a second-hand desk and chair from the university surplus store, plates, utensils, and a single pot and pan from the dollar store. Each purchase was carefully calculated, prioritizing work necessities over comfort. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's tasks were complete, the emotional weight would come crashing down. The betrayal felt physical, a constant ache in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. How could the people who raised me, who supposedly loved me, discard me so easily? Was I really worth so little to them? The only bright spot came in the form of my coworker Natalie, who I had occasionally collaborated with on larger projects. When I explained my situation during a video, her outrage on my behalf was validating. "That's completely messed up," she fumed. "Who does that to their own daughter?" She invited me to dinner at her apartment, introducing me to her roommates, and sending me home with leftovers and a small houseplant to make your new place feel more like home. The simple kindness brought me to tears in the privacy of my car. 3 weeks after moving out, I experienced my first panic attack while grocery shopping. Standing in the cereal aisle trying to calculate whether I could justify the name brand or should stick to the generic, I suddenly couldn't catch my breath. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, sounds too loud. Abandoning my half-filled cart, I made it to my car before completely breaking down, gasping for air between sobs. That night, I researched local mental health resources and found a community clinic offering therapy on a sliding scale. My first appointment with Dr. Gabriela Torres was scheduled for the following week. "What you're experiencing is a normal response to an abnormal situation," she told me during our initial session. "Your family violated your trust in a profound way. That's genuine trauma." Over the next few weeks, Dr. Torres helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family dynamic for years. The golden child syndrome that elevated Jake above consequences. The parentification that had me taking on adult responsibilities while my brother remained perpetually childish. The conditional love that made me feel I needed to earn my place through financial contributions and perfect behavior. "Your decision to leave was healthy," she assured me. "You're establishing boundaries that should have been respected all along." Armed with this new perspective, I gradually found my footing. Each day that I survived, paid a bill, completed a project, made dinner in my tiny kitchen, added a small layer of confidence, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something new from the ground up. Something that was entirely mine. 6 weeks after my abrupt departure from my parents' home, I stood in the center of my small studio apartment and realized I had developed entirely new routines. My mornings now began with a homemade coffee and breakfast at my small bistro table by the window, watching the early light filter through the single tree outside. Evenings ended with a hot shower in my tiny bathroom and reading on my second-hand armchair. The space was minimal but intentional, everything in it chosen by me, for me. Work had become both my lifeline and my challenge. I pushed myself harder than ever, knowing financial stability was entirely on my shoulders. I extended my working hours, took on smaller projects I might have previously declined, and carefully tracked every expense in a detailed spreadsheet. Some nights I worked until my eyes burned, determined to build enough security that I would never again be vulnerable to someone else's whims. The apartment complex I had initially viewed as temporary began to feel like a community. The young couple next door invited me for homemade pizza. The college student across the hall borrowed my printer for a term paper and returned the favor with fresh-baked cookies. Most significantly, I met Martha, a 78-year-old retired English teacher who lived at the end of my hallway. Martha first knocked on my door to deliver a misdirected package. Our brief conversation extended to a cup of tea, which became a standing Sunday afternoon ritual. Her apartment was filled with books and mementos from decades of teaching, and she approached my situation with a wisdom born from having seen just about everything human beings can do to each other. "Family is complicated," she told me, pouring more chamomile into my cup. "Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into." As December approached, the reality of spending the holidays alone loomed before me. My inbox remained empty of any reconciliatory messages from my parents. Social media showed festive preparations beginning at my childhood home. A tree in the window, lights along the roofline, life continuing without me. Christmas Day arrived cold and bright. I had declined Martha's kind invitation to join her at her daughter's home, not wanting to intrude on family traditions. Instead, I treated myself to pancakes shaped like snowmen, opened a small gift I had wrapped for myself, a beautiful sketchbook, and took a long walk through the quiet streets. The day was melancholy but also strangely freeing. No tense family dinner, no watching Jake open mountains of presents while I received practical items like socks and gas cards. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from my mother, "Merry Christmas. Hope you're doing well." No questions about where I was living, no acknowledgement of the situation, no apology. The casual tone suggested she was messaging a distant acquaintance rather than a daughter who had been effectively evicted from her home. I stared at those 7 words for nearly an hour, composing and deleting responses. Part of me wanted to lash out with all the hurt I had suppressed. Another part craved reconciliation even without the apology I deserved. In the end, I set the phone aside without replying. Dr. Torres had emphasized the importance of responding rather than reacting, and I wasn't yet clear on what healthy response looked like. As the calendar turned to a new year, I created resolutions focused not on changing myself, but on building boundaries and self-respect. I would no longer accept relationships where I was undervalued. I would recognize my own worth, independent of external validation. I would cultivate connections with people who demonstrated through actions that they cared about my well-being. Winter evenings were too cold and dark for much socializing, so I signed up for a weekend art class at the community center, a return to the pure creative expression that had led me to graphic design in the first place. The instructor, a retired commercial artist, recognized my professional background and often asked my input, boosting my confidence. It was there I met Anthony, a web designer whose aesthetic sense complemented my own. "Your work has such distinctive personality," he commented, studying my charcoal still life. "You can tell there's a point of view behind it." Our conversations after class led to coffee, which led to collaborating on a project for one of his clients, who needed both web and print materials. Working together revealed our compatible styles and work ethics. When he suggested we could partner on more projects in the future, I felt a flutter of possibility, both professional and perhaps something more. With each passing week, my confidence in my professional abilities grew stronger. I redesigned my portfolio website, raising my rates to reflect my experience and expertise. I became more selective about projects, focusing on clients who valued quality over speed and appreciated my creative input. To my surprise, this approach attracted more business rather than less. My tiny apartment gradually transformed into a true home. A colleague gifted me a cutting from her pothos plant, which grew lush and green along my windowsill. I found a colorful hand-woven rug at a thrift store that brightened the drab carpet. Weekend flea market visits yielded affordable art for my walls, chosen purely because the images spoke to me. Each edition reflected my personality in a way my bedroom at my parents' house never truly had constrained, as it was by my fear of taking up too much space. One February evening, after completing a particularly challenging project that had stretched my skills in new directions, I found myself sitting contentedly with a cup of tea, jazz playing softly from my laptop speakers. The realization struck me with unexpected force. I was happy. Not despite the dramatic upheaval in my life, but in many ways because of it. Being forced out of my comfort zone had revealed strengths I never knew I possessed. The painful severing of family ties had made room for healthier connections. For the first time since that shocking homecoming from Hawaii, I felt grateful for the path I was on. Not because what my family did was right, but because their actions had pushed me toward the independence I had unconsciously been avoiding. 6 months after my departure, spring bloomed across Ohio, bringing with it longer days and the scent of renewal. My design business had stabilized into a sustainable rhythm, and my friendship with Anthony had deepened into something neither of us had yet labeled, but both clearly valued. For the first time in my adult life, I felt fully present in my own existence, rather than orbiting around my family's needs and expectations. It was during this period of personal growth that I began noticing concerning signs about my family's situation through the window of social media. Though I rarely checked my parents' profiles, intentionally mutual connections occasionally shared their posts on my feed. My father's once boastful updates about golf outings and backyard barbecues had dwindled. My mother's carefully curated photos of home-cooked family dinners were replaced with vague, inspirational quotes about weathering storms and staying strong through challenges. Most telling were the changes in Jake's streaming presence. Despite the professional equipment and dedicated studio space that had cost me my home, his follower count remained stagnant around 400. His once daily streams became sporadic, then virtually non-existent by April. The few viewer comments I saw expressed confusion about his inconsistent schedule and deteriorating attitude on camera. I might have continued observing these changes from a distance indefinitely had it not been for the unexpected call from my mother's sister, Aunt Diane. We had always been close. She had no children of her own and often treated me like the daughter she never had. Unlike my parents, she had reached out several times since my departure, respecting my boundaries but making sure I knew she was there if needed. "Shirley, do you have a few minutes to talk?" Her voice carried a weight I immediately recognized as significant. "Of course. Is everything okay?" The heavy sigh on the other end answered before her words did. "Not really, honey. Things at your parents' house have gotten pretty rough." Over the next 30 minutes, Aunt Diane detailed the financial crisis my family was facing. The expensive gaming equipment for Jake's streaming setup had been purchased entirely on credit cards with high interest rates. My parents had then taken out a second mortgage on the house to renovate not just my former bedroom, but also update the living room and kitchen to serve as additional streaming backgrounds. They were convinced he was going to be the next big thing, Aunt Diane explained. "Your dad kept talking about gaming sponsorships and subscription revenue like it was guaranteed." All this financial overextension might have been manageable if two critical events hadn't occurred simultaneously. Jake's streaming career failed to generate any meaningful income, and my father was included in a round of corporate downsizing, losing the job he'd held for 22 years. "Your dad's been job hunting for 3 months now, but it's tough at his age," Aunt Diane continued. "The mortgage is 2 months behind, and the credit card debt is over $30,000. I sat at my small kitchen table, struggling to process these revelations. "What about Jake? Is he helping at all?" Another heavy sigh. "Jake moved in with his girlfriend and her parents about a month ago. Barely calls from what your mom says." The irony was almost too perfect. The golden child abandoning ship at the first sign of trouble, while I, the one they had cast aside, was building a stable life through hard work and determination. "Lisa's been asking if I've heard from you," Aunt Diane added carefully. "She won't call you directly, too proud, I think, but she's been asking where you are, if you're okay." "I'm fine," I replied, surprised by the defensiveness in my voice. "Better than fine, actually. I have my own place. My business is doing well. I'm happy." "I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserved better than what they did." After hanging up, I sat motionless, emotions churning. There was vindication, certainly, a grim satisfaction that the golden child fantasy had crumbled so spectacularly. But there was also concern for my parents, despite everything, and confusion about my own responsibility, if any, in their current predicament. That evening's therapy session with Dr. Torres focused entirely on processing this new information. "It's natural to feel conflicted," she assured me. "You can simultaneously recognize that they're facing consequences of their own choices and feel empathy for their suffering." "Part of me wants to help," I admitted, "and part of me thinks that would just reinforce the idea that I'll always be there to fix their problems no matter how they treat me." "What would helping look like for you? What boundaries would you need?" It was a question I couldn't immediately answer. Financial assistance seemed inappropriate. I had worked too hard for my stability to compromise it for people who had valued me so little. Emotional support felt premature without acknowledgement of the harm they'd caused. In the following weeks, I focused on my own growth rather than their crisis. Anthony and I collaborated on more projects, our professional partnership evolving naturally into romantic dates and long conversations about our creative aspirations. Martha continued to provide grandmotherly wisdom over Sunday tea, while my friendship circle expanded through professional networking events and community activities. When my lease approached renewal, I decided to move to a slightly larger one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, still modest, but with a separate bedroom and a small balcony where I could nurture more plants. The rent increase was manageable thanks to my growing client list and careful saving habits. On moving day, Anthony and 3 other friends helped carry furniture and boxes, turning a potentially stressful experience into an impromptu celebration. As we shared pizza and beer on my new balcony that evening, I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who supported me without obligation or condition, and felt a profound gratitude. The family I had lost had never truly seen me. The connections I was building now were with people who appreciated me exactly as I was. Whatever happened with my parents and Jake going forward, I knew I would face it from a position of strength and self-knowledge that I had never possessed before. Almost 1 year had passed since that life-altering return from Hawaii. The calendar's approach to that anniversary found me in circumstances I could never have imagined during those first desperate days of displacement. My design business had evolved from mere survival to genuine success. I had established myself as a specialist in branding for sustainable businesses, commanding rates that reflected my expertise and allowing me to be increasingly selective about projects. My client testimonials page featured glowing reviews from companies across 3 states. My relationship with Anthony had deepened into something solid and nurturing. We maintained separate apartments but spent most weekends together establishing traditions like Saturday morning farmers market visits and Sunday evening cooking experiments. He understood my history and respected the careful pace at which I approached commitment. Most significantly, I had received notification that a branding campaign I created for a women's health collective was nominated for a regional design award, external validation of my creative vision that felt particularly meaningful given the past year's journey. The nomination called for celebration. Anthony made reservations at an upscale restaurant downtown, insisting this was a champagne-worthy occasion. Dressed in a simple black dress I had treated myself to with my last major invoice payment, I felt confident and centered in a way that still occasionally surprised me. We were midway through our entrees discussing whether to share the chocolate lava cake for dessert when my phone began vibrating continuously in my purse. After the 3rd consecutive call, I discreetly checked the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. 60 missed calls from my mother's number. A single text message. "Where are you?" "Everything okay?" Anthony asked, noticing my expression. "It's my mom," I whispered, showing him the screen. "Something must be wrong." He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need to do, I'm here." I excused myself to the restaurant's quiet hallway near the restrooms and stared at my phone, heart pounding. After nearly a year of silence, this sudden, urgent communication felt ominous. Should I call back immediately? Was someone hurt? Or was this another manipulation, a crisis manufactured to pull me back into dysfunctional family dynamics? Dr. Torres's voice echoed in my mind. Boundaries aren't about punishing others, they're about protecting yourself. You can respond with compassion while still maintaining your limits. I took a deep breath and texted back, "I'm at dinner. Is there an emergency?" The response came immediately. "Need to talk to you. Please call when you can." No emergency then, at least. Not a medical crisis requiring immediate attention. I returned to the table and explained the situation to Anthony, who supported my decision to finish our celebration dinner before engaging. "Whatever it is, you'll handle it better with food in your stomach and a clear head," he reasoned. "And either way, we're still celebrating your nomination tonight." For the next week, I let the calls go to voicemail while consulting with Dr. Torres about the healthiest approach. Each message from my mother grew increasingly desperate but remained frustratingly vague. "Please call me back, we need to talk. Things are really bad," without any acknowledgement of our estrangement or why I might be hesitant to respond. "What do you want from this potential reconnection?" Dr. Torres asked during our session. "Honestly, recognition," I replied after careful consideration. "I want them to understand what they did and why it was wrong. Not just the room situation, but the years of treating Jake and me so differently." On the 8th day, my mother left a voicemail that finally broke through my hesitation. Her voice cracked with emotion as she detailed the complete breakdown of the family's situation. "The bank is foreclosing on the house next month. Your father's blood pressure is so high the doctor is worried about stroke risk. Jake hasn't returned our calls in weeks." She paused, and I heard a muffled sob before she continued. "Shirley, we were wrong. So wrong about everything. The way we treated you. I don't expect forgiveness, but please, please, call me back." I played the message for Anthony that evening as we sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors reminiscent of my Hawaiian escape that now felt like another lifetime. "What are you thinking?" he asked after a long silence. "I'm thinking that I'm glad I'm not jumping in my car right now to rescue them," I admitted. "A year ago, I would have dropped everything, emptied. My savings tried to fix it all. Now I feel, I don't know, sad for them but clear about my own boundaries. That sounds like growth to me, he said, squeezing my hand. The next morning, I called Martha for her perspective. Despite being nearly 8 decades into her life journey, she approached problems with refreshing directness. You don't owe them your money or your home, she stated firmly. But if you want any kind of relationship going forward, even a distant one, you might owe them a conversation. That evening, I finally returned my mother's call, setting clear parameters. I'm willing to meet you and Dad for coffee this weekend to talk. Just talk. I'm not in a position to offer financial help. My mother agreed immediately, her relief palpable even through the phone line. We arranged to meet at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our locations. Saturday arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Anthony offered to drive me and wait nearby, an offer I gratefully accepted. Just text if you need an excuse to leave, he said, kissing my forehead before I exited his car. I arrived 10 minutes early, securing a table in the corner that offered some privacy. My parents entered together exactly on time, and the sight of them momentarily took my breath away. They had aged visibly in the past year. My father's confident posture had diminished into a slight stoop. My mother's hair showed more gray, her face lined with stress. They hesitated at the entrance until I raised my hand in acknowledgement. As they approached, I noticed my mother clutching a small gift bag with trembling fingers. "Shirley," she whispered, as if saying my name might cause me to disappear. You look wonderful." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Please sit down." The initial conversation was painfully awkward. Stilted exchanges about the weather, my mother's nervousness causing her to spill her coffee, my father's uncharacteristic silence. Finally, after several minutes of this tension, my mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "We need to say this first before anything else. We were wrong, Shirley. Terribly, inexcusably wrong." My father nodded, clearing his throat. "What we did to you, taking your room, treating you like you didn't matter, it was the worst mistake of our lives. Jake moved out 3 months ago," my mother continued. "The minute things got difficult, when we needed him to contribute, he was gone. All that investment, all that special treatment, and he just—" She trailed off, wiping tears with a napkin. "The house goes to the bank next month," my father added, his voice rough with emotion. "We're moving to an apartment about a third the size. Had to sell most of the furniture already." I sat quietly listening without interrupting, allowing them the space to unburden themselves without immediately offering absolution. When they finally fell silent, I took a deep breath. "I appreciate your apology," I began carefully. "This past year has been a journey of recognizing my own worth and building boundaries. I'm not going to pretend what happened didn't hurt me deeply." "We understand," my mother whispered. "I need to be clear about something. I'm not in a position to help financially. My business is doing well, but I've worked extremely hard for my stability." My father raised a hand. "We're not asking for money, Shirley. We made our bed and now we're lying in it. We miss you. We miss our daughter." Something in his humility touched a place in my heart I had thought permanently closed to them. "I can't promise anything right now, but I'm willing to start with occasional coffee like this. Small steps." My mother pushed the small gift bag across the table. "We understand. This is just something we thought you should have." Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me at my college graduation, flanked by my beaming parents, my hard-earned design degree clutched proudly in my hands. A moment when possibility stretched before me before betrayal and rebirth. "We're proud of you, Shirley," my father said softly. "We should have told you that every day." As I left the coffee shop, emotions swirling, I texted Anthony, "Coming out now." It went, "Okay. I'll tell you everything on the drive home." I had maintained my boundaries while showing compassion. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps it was the beginning of something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation and inequity. The days following our coffee shop meeting were filled with quiet reflection. I found myself remembering moments from my childhood before the family dynamic had skewed so dramatically. My father teaching me to ride a bike, my mother helping me prepare for a science fair, the sense of security I once felt in their presence. These memories existed alongside the pain they had caused, neither canceling out the other but creating a more complex understanding of our shared history. My parents had begun the difficult process of downsizing from our family home to a small two-bedroom apartment across town. Through cautious text exchanges, I learned they were selling most of their furniture and belongings, a humbling process that forced them to evaluate what truly mattered. The gaming equipment that had once seemed worth sacrificing our relationship now sat in garbage bags bound for resale shops. Jake remained conspicuously absent from their lives. According to my mother, he had blocked their numbers after they asked if he could contribute to their rent. The golden child had revealed his true nature when the spotlight of preference was finally extinguished. I maintained careful boundaries during this transition. When my mother hinted they might need help moving, I recommended an affordable moving service rather than offering my personal assistance. When my father mentioned struggling to find employment, I sent links to job resources rather than promising to ask my professional contacts. Small kindnesses that acknowledged their humanity without sacrificing my hard-won independence. Meanwhile, my own life continued to flourish. My design award nomination resulted in an honorable mention, which brought new attention to my portfolio and several promising client inquiries. Anthony and I had begun tentatively discussing the possibility of moving in together when his lease ended, in 3 months a step that both excited and slightly terrified me after my year of carefully guarded self-sufficiency. Martha continued to provide wisdom over Sunday tea, now joined occasionally by Anthony, who had charmed my elderly friend with his genuine interest in her teaching stories. "He's a keeper," she declared after he fixed her wobbly kitchen table without being asked. "He sees you clearly and likes what he sees." As summer transitioned to fall, Anthony and I made the decision to combine our lives and our living spaces. We found a comfortable two-bedroom apartment with enough room for both our home offices, a small garden balcony, and a kitchen where we could continue our culinary experiments. Moving in together felt like a natural progression rather than a desperate grasping or settling. The weekend we signed the lease, I received a text from my mother asking if we could meet for coffee again. Something in her message seemed different. Less desperate, more thoughtful. When we met at our now regular cafe, she arrived alone. "Your father had a job interview," she explained, a hint of optimism in her voice for the first time in months. "It's nothing fancy, just assistant manager at a hardware store, but it's something." We settled into what had become our routine. 2 coffees, a shared pastry, careful conversation that avoided both excessive intimacy and cold distance. But today my mother seemed to have something specific on her mind. "Thanksgiving is next month," she said finally. "I know it might be too soon, but I wanted to ask, would you consider joining us? Just a simple dinner at our apartment. Nothing elaborate." The invitation hung between us, weighted with significance. The first holiday, the first formal acknowledgement that we were attempting to build something new from the ruins of our former relationship. "I'd need to check with Anthony," I replied, neither accepting nor refusing immediately. "We might have plans." She nodded clearly, having prepared herself for this response. "Of course, he would be very welcome too if you decide to come." That evening, Anthony and I discussed the invitation as we unpacked kitchen boxes in our new home. "What do you want to do?" he asked, placing mugs on open shelving. "Part of me wants to go to see if real change is possible," I admitted. "And part of me is afraid of falling back into old patterns." "What if we flip the script?" he suggested. "Instead of going to their apartment, what if we invited them here? This is your territory, your terms." The idea was both terrifying and empowering. Our new apartment represented everything I had built in the year since being discarded: my independence, my growth, my chosen family, and Anthony. Inviting my parents into this space would be allowing them to see the person I had become without them. After careful consideration, I extended the counter-invitation, which my parents accepted with surprised gratitude. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with preparation, not just menu planning and cleaning, but emotional preparation with Dr. Torres about maintaining boundaries while opening the door to new possibilities. Thanksgiving Day arrived crisp and clear. Anthony and I cooked together all morning, preparing a modest but beautiful meal. When the doorbell rang at 3 o'clock, I took a deep breath before opening the door to my parents, who stood awkwardly holding a bouquet of flowers and a homemade pie. "Welcome," I said, stepping back to allow them entry. "Please come in." Their eyes moved around our space with obvious curiosity and appreciation. My design awards displayed on the bookshelf. The gallery wall of photos Anthony and I had taken on weekend hikes. The comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than television viewing. "Your home is beautiful, Shirley," my mother said softly. "It feels like you." The meal began with tension but gradually relaxed as Anthony shared funny stories from his web design clients and my father cautiously mentioned his new job was going well. By dessert, the conversation had found a rhythm that, while not entirely natural, was no longer painfully forced. As we cleared plates, my mother helped me pack leftovers in the kitchen while Anthony showed my father our balcony garden. "You've built a good life," she said carefully, wrapping a plate. "We can see that." "I have," I agreed. "It was hard, especially at first, but necessary." "I understand that now." She hesitated, then continued. "When you left, I was so angry at first. I thought you were being selfish, abandoning the family. It took losing everything to realize you were just respecting yourself in a way we never taught you to do." It was the most insightful thing my mother had ever said about our relationship, an acknowledgement that went beyond surface apologies to a deeper understanding. After my parents left, Anthony and I sat on our couch with glasses of wine, processing the day. "How do you feel?" he asked, his arm warm around my shoulders. "Surprisingly okay," I realized. "They're different. Humbled, more aware. And you're stronger. They can see that." The truth of his words settled comfortably around me. I was stronger, not despite what had happened, but because of it. Being forced to start over had revealed capabilities I might never have discovered otherwise. In the months that followed, we established a new pattern with my parents. Monthly dinners, occasional texts, a relationship based on adult interaction rather than the parent-child dynamic that had kept me small. They never asked for money or significant help, seeming to understand that boundary was non-negotiable. My brother remained absent from all our interactions, having apparently found a new family to manipulate. While I occasionally felt sadness for the sibling relationship we never truly had, I recognized that some connections were too damaged to repair. Meanwhile, my chosen family continued to expand. Martha joined us for weekly dinners. Natalie and her new boyfriend became regular fixtures at our game nights. Anthony's parents visited from Michigan and warmly welcomed me as part of their son's life. When spring arrived, bringing the anniversary of my business's rebirth in my first tiny studio apartment, I took myself to lunch at an upscale cafe to celebrate. Sitting alone with my thoughts, I reflected on the journey from that devastating homecoming to the life I now embraced. The painful ejection from what I thought was my safe harbor had ultimately set me on a course toward authentic happiness. In losing what I thought I needed, I had discovered what I truly deserved: respect, reciprocity, and relationships that added value rather than extracted it. Looking back, I could almost feel grateful for that moment when my father pointed to the shed and offered his cruel ultimatum. In choosing to leave rather than diminish myself, I had chosen a path to genuine wholeness. What's your story of finding strength after betrayal? Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family dynamics to save yourself? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to hear more journeys of resilience and growth. Remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, only by how you choose to treat yourself.